listening to America First Radio.
And we're gonna win, win, win. And we're gonna make America great again.
Here is your host, Paul Adams.
240 years. Can you believe it? Here we are, at a critical juncture in our history. I pray every day for Mr. Trump and his family. I pray that they may succeed and withstand any opposition, that any weapon formed against them may fail. And we're very grateful for his service, for his sacrifices, and we really do believe he's going to be the best president we've ever had. That's my feeling. Now, this is a very special podcast because we're going to get down to the nuts and bolts. We've got some things to cover first. I want to thank Scott Isbell on Twitter for his support. Scott is one of the top 50 social media influencers on Twitter. He has over 722,000 followers. He's a successful pop funk artist. He is young, he's brilliant, and he's a very staunch Trump supporter. And you've got to listen to his song Trumpified on SoundCloud.com. It will blow you away. Thank you, Scott. Now, my top tweet for June was as follows. Pull back to 30,000 feet. Obama is a Muslim globalist tool sparking the clash of civilizations to exhaust Western nations. That tweet got the most likes and retweets. In other news this week, Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch met in a plane to discuss golf and grandchildren, supposedly. If you believe this, I have a 1804 Cadillac for sale. As far as Trey Gowdy, he will not call Hillary a liar. He wants to leave that verdict up to us. Thank you, Trey. Hillary's lie about a video triggering the attacks in Benghazi had everything to do with altering reality back then to get Obama back in for a second term. It had nothing to do with a video on the internet. At the time, Libya was being sold to Americans as an example of how the U.S. could get rid of Al-Qaeda. But in the shadows, Obama and Clinton were gun-running weapons from Libya to ISIS in Syria. And Stevens knew too much and had to take a dive. So privately to her family, Hillary labeled it as a planned terrorist attack, which had nothing to do with the video, an attack which the State Department knew was imminent right down to the day. And they used that date, 9/11, to commemorate the attacks on 9/11, the attacks on the World Trade Center. That's the truth. And we can never forget those men who died on that day. Now, in other news, internal polls show that Trump is pulling ahead on Hillary, which really means that Hillary is tanking. If she's going to call on Elizabeth Warren as vice president, she's probably doing the same song and dance that Ted Cruz did with Carly Fiorina. It's a desperation move. And to add some sparkle, there's a 2004 video that has surfaced of Elizabeth Warren dissing Hillary Clinton for being a globalist tool. Isn't that ironic? And I have to tell you, I did spruce up Clinton's logo by adding an S. That is an S as in sociopath right before the H, and a T as in transgender right after the H. I think it has tons of potential. I figured if Elizabeth Warren comes on board, for the same price will be getting double the bull. Now, I will be uploading an exclusive podcast on Hillary very soon, unless the FBI recommends an indictment first, which could happen any day. I really dislike Ted Cruz, but Hillary, she's in a league all of her own. Let me put it in some perspective. During the primaries, I went out of my way creating memes which described my loathing for Cruz. I also resorted to, text. And Twitter only allows you 140 characters. Hardly enough when it comes to describing Cruz. But to put it into perspective, I said Cruz is a calculating, evil, pathological, lying, stealing, cheating, demented, shameless, bought and paid for piece of... Ted, if you're listening, it's not personal. It's all business, okay? It's America first business. I didn't go as far as Boehner to call him, Lucifer in the flesh. I thought that was a little rich, but it would not be rich enough in describing Hillary, Lucifer's star pupil. You must all know that she wrote her college thesis on Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, a book in which Alinsky dedicated to Lucifer. That kind of tells you where her mindset's at. Now I'll be coming back to Hillary hopefully before, like I said, the FBI pack of hyenas break their fast and have a go at her. Moving along on to the next segment here, there's a couple things we need to put to rest. One is Mr. Trump's VP pick. People are speculating who it will be, when he will announce. In my opinion, there's absolutely no reason on earth for Mr. Trump to announce his VP at this point. He should not have to rely on anybody else's pull, charisma, momentum to make it across the finish line. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. He made it this far on his own. Why should he share the limelight at this point with anybody else? Announcing his VP choice would only provide the media wolves with another prey to rip apart. And it would look as if it was a desperation move. And another thing, for his detractors out there, like Mr. Mittens Romney and Paul Ryan, there's nothing in the Constitution that requires a tax return test. In fact, there's no test for net worth, annual income, unpaid taxes, or bankruptcy. And if anything, if you look at the 24th Amendment, it provides that no financial burden be imposed on voters. There's to be no poll tax. Voters are allowed to vote even if they owe back taxes, and therefore the same spirit should apply to a presidential candidate. In all fairness, one would think. It's none of our business how much he's made, what his net worth is, how much taxes he's paid. Those are private matters. The focus should be on the bribery that goes on in Capitol Hill. The media should be focusing on Hillary's emails, her lies about Benghazi. I just read something from Donald Trump Jr., which makes total sense. The party establishment, he says, will do whatever they can to stop my father because they realize if he gets in there, the little game they're used to playing where everyone takes care of everyone else and everyone makes money off each other and everyone's doing incredibly well for doing nothing, that all ends. So true. They are attacking Mr. Trump with every slanderous label from every angle. And this is right out of Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Rule number 5 says, ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There's no defense, it's irrational, it's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. Well, it ain't working for Mr. Trump. Moving on, we come to the most critical segment of this episode. I want to continue from where we left off in episode 1, in which I discussed the systemic flaws in our government, which include government corruption and its disconnect from the electorate, things we all know. But unless and until that is fixed, no matter who is elected, everything will be cosmetic. We established that the initial initiative to form a government by the Founding Fathers, which was to be a model government, a radical new form of government that would fly in the face of conventional governance by a monarch or an emperor, was to be a true first in the evolution of democracies. That initiative was set in motion at the behest of the people, the employers. If Mr. Trump is listening, I would hope this discussion strikes a chord with him, because I know he's an innovator, he's brilliant, and we are really at a point where we would like to reinvent America so that it lasts longer than 4 or 8 years. Because after he will have retired from public service, we'll be left with the same problems, and we don't want that. So we the people must actively be involved in this process. Mr. Trump, as a real estate developer, I think you would agree that there is no point remodeling a building if its foundation is crumbling or if there's other systemic flaws. You would not think of undertaking cosmetic changes until the systemic structural defects were first resolved. So I have thought very long and hard over a period of weeks as to how to present this pivotal make or break topic, the rebuilding of the Republic. It's a huge, ginormous topic of discussion. There is nothing more important than ensuring that America remains sovereign for generations to come, not just for the next 4 or 8 years. Okay, because what's going to happen when a new sheriff comes into town after Mr. Trump leaves? So this is what I decided. Let's pretend the Founding Fathers came back from the dead to inspect the Republic, to examine the fruits of their labors. I envision a televised broadcast featuring, in the following order, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, and finally George Washington. You can imagine the ratings of that epic program. The whole planet would be watching. People would be taking day off work just to watch this. I can just imagine 5'4" James Madison, the aloof loner who disliked crowds and detested having to speak in public because of his high-pitched voice. I can imagine his piercing blue eyes staring into the camera with a steady gaze and getting right down to the nuts and bolts. Here's what he would say. My fellow Americans, in our day, 240 years ago, we were the radicals, the innovators, the mavericks, the outcasts. And today I bring you good news and bad news. The bad news first. Your Constitution requires revision. Your First Amendment needs amending. In our day, we could never have envisioned an ideology disguised as a religion landing on our shores with the intent of destroying our Constitution, let alone infiltrating our government and repressing our people. Either the ideology needs to reform, or it must be excluded from our dinner table. Your press is no longer free. It is a state-owned fourth arm of government, owned by the plutocrats and globalists. It alters your reality to benefit the puppet masters at the expense of the people. Now, I note a movement started on July 1st to boycott one of your networks, CNN. That's a good start. Your Second Amendment, as it stands, is a disaster. You have a central government with disproportionate military powers that include nuclear weapons, a naval and air force that is next to none, armaments of every variety, and yet the government, your employee, is worried about the people carrying an AR-15, which is nothing more than a semi-automatic rifle. You need to bolster and embolden your Second Amendment. We designed the Second Amendment to give you the people parity with the federal government in case it goes rogue. We must make it more robust. We never intended for the Second Amendment to regulate hunting rifles. Your Fourth Amendment, as written, has severe defects. An intrusive surveillance state is monitoring your every move. It can monitor your finances, your personal effects, your comings and goings without probable cause. It reports it is defending the people from terrorists of all things, which in truth your government has armed and funded several times to create the illusion of a perpetual war on terror. You are transparent to it while it is opaque to you. Your Fifth Amendment, as written, is defective. Too many criminals in your government are being deposed who are invoking protection from self-incrimination in matters of national security. Treasonous acts merit no protection from self-incrimination. Your Sixth Amendment, which ensures speedy trials, has been encroached by the National Defense Authorization Act, which came into effect in the name of an endless war on terror, again, manufactured by globalist interests within your own government. Your Ninth and Tenth Amendments are entitling you, the people, with rights and powers. We put those in place to remind you, as the employer, that the people hold ultimate power over their government. These two amendments must be invoked if you are to remain a republic. In an era with such intrusive technology, the people must utilize the same technology in order to be self-governing. My colleague George Washington will elaborate later. Your 12th Amendment is antiquated. With the technological reforms we shall propose, there will be no reason to rely on an electoral college. Your 14th Amendment is deficient insofar as it creates a loophole. Section 1 supersedes any immigration acts you may pass. We are partly at fault. We should have drafted a robust article devoted entirely on rules of naturalization and citizenship. As the 14th Amendment reads, it entitles persons residing within your territories and states, persons who are not citizens, with the same rights to life and equal protection under the law as citizens. Rights to life, by necessity, include rights to medical treatments, rights to be self-sustaining, that is to say, to be employed, rights to travel, and rights to set roots, to propagate, and to build a life. We specifically did not prohibit the states from establishing rules on naturalization in Article 1, Section 10, and perhaps we should have. As things stand, technically a state adhering to its own constitution and laws may permit persons residing in its state to become citizens of that state. Your 16th Amendment pertaining to taxation, henceforth, should be ratified directly by the people. Your 20th and 25th Amendments pertaining to succession of power could be merged into a single amendment. Your 22nd Amendment could also encompass term limits for all officers in government, elected or appointed. The Constitution as it stands must be revised to accommodate a new branch of government, something which my colleague George Washington will elaborate on. Now some words from my colleague Thomas Jefferson.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just heard from James Madison, Jr., who was a political theorist, American statesman, and the 4th President of the United States. He is also hailed as the father of the Constitution for his pivotal role in drafting and promoting the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Please join us on July the 4th as we hear from Mr. Thomas Jefferson, Mr. Alexander Hamilton, and also Mr. George Washington. Until then, happy 4th.